Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, adnasnana. It is a pleasure to be back with you here on this wonderful sunny summer day. I had a conversation with a gentleman named Juan Sepulveda. Those of you in the Masonic community may have heard of him before. He's a Freemason and the host of the Winding Stairs Masonic Podcast. As I said, it was quite a wide-ranging conversation that we had. We covered a lot of topics. The big one we covered was why Masons are leaving their lodges. That was just one of them. There was a number of them, the different topics we covered. And I'm going to share that with you today. Before I do, though, I want to remind you to share, like, and subscribe with this particular segment, as well as hit on the PayPal link in the details section of this segment and make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. We will use that to move the podcast forward. I do not have a sponsor, just remember that. So everything you see on here is very genuine and not sponsor driven. So let's move forward. You're going to really enjoy this interview, so let's move forward with this.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Okay. Mr. Sepulveda, welcome to Points of Light Radio.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to join you tonight.
Well, it's always a pleasure interviewing a fellow podcaster, and you are a Freemason and host of the Winding Stairs Masonic Podcast. First of all, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself?
I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and there I started working as an artist. I had an early enough exposure to Freemasonry because I had a relative who was a member, and he was very discreet about it, didn't talk much about it, but he was a gentleman that I really admired. So I was kind of tenacious in my exploration about what Freemasonry was about. So eventually I moved to the States when I was in college, and then I started taking it seriously to see if I could take the necessary steps to become a Freemason. Everything that I read about it lined up with the kind of person that I am. And one thing led to another. I reached out to a lodge, and that's how my Masonic journey began. And having been an artist and a professional, here in the States, I became a professional artist in 2004. I combined those two things, and later we'll talk a little bit more about how that connection happens.
So you said it lined up with who you were. What kind of person were you?
So I find myself to be an industrious individual. I like to pursue things, to organize projects, to move forward in life. I'm always trying to become better than I used to be. And it seemed that many of the tenets that I found in Freemasonry were conducive or were a fertile ground for those things to continue progressing. So if you think about the call for us to be industrious, for us to be virtuous in our business, in our dealings with other people, the call for us to be circumspect and be able to analyze ourselves and continue moving forward in improvement, that I found that very appealing. So a lot of the literature that I came across lined up with some of those beliefs. So that really made it very attractive to me.
Now, you say you're from Puerto Rico. Is Masonry very big in Puerto Rico? I know it's fairly big in England, parts of Europe, or in the United States. But is it that big in Puerto Rico?
It has a significant presence.
Wow.
It has a very long history in Puerto Rico. Many people who were involved in the development of Puerto Rico as a civilized country were involved in Freemasonry. So
Interesting.
yeah, and Freemasons had an impact even on some other leaders that were never got an opportunity to join Freemasonry. Like, for example, one of our luminaires in Puerto Rico is Pedro Albizu Campo. And he has a very fascinating story. But one of them, he went to study law at Harvard from Puerto Rico, and it was paid for by the Freemasons.
See, yeah, they do a lot of good. Now, you reached out to me with something that God has laid on your heart today, and that's a matter of why Masons, as you put it, turn their backs on the lodge and never return. So what have you found as you've studied that?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook group called the Winding Stairs Freemasonry Group. It has about 33,000 members. Granted, not all of them are Freemasons, but these are people that are either Masons or interested in Freemasonry. So I use that platform to have conversations that are going to either help the group as a whole or help individuals in their pursuit of excellence. And one of the things that I came across was that even though Freemasonry is very attractive to a lot of people, and in today's society, some of the lessons that are part of Masonry seem to be very adequate and necessary, many good men who join the fraternity eventually become either inactive or dormant, as some people refer to it. So I went ahead and I wanted to gauge that. I wanted to have some discussions about what did they think, they meaning the membership of the group, were some of the reasons why people would be very active, very excited, very engaged, and eventually just fade into a lack of participation. So I put together a question. I asked the following. I said, in one short sentence, why do most brothers stop going to lodge? I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to you that I didn't get a lot of short sentences. I got a lot of... That post in particular had 475 comments as of today.
Yeah.
So it's a very active discussion. And many of them obviously were responses that were very anecdotal. People talking about how they felt, what they had noticed, what they have seen. And among the responses, I saw some commonality. One of them that kept on being lack of engagement, or it was boring. Mm-hmm. And another one was about cliques or politics or people who were perhaps, angling to be part of leadership or something like that. The other prominent was what unmet expectations. People came into the fraternity expecting something and didn't actually didn't receive it, or not that they didn't receive it, but they didn't find it engaging. Is that?
This is.
Oh, yeah. I see what you mean.
You get a lot, and that's not just with Freemasonry. That's with a lot of other fraternities as well. I'm in several of them. So.
Yeah. The sad part is that it's not always because it's not there, what you came in looking for, is that it's not necessarily nourished.
Yeah.
And I can go into details on that. So, but after I got all of those 475 answers, I narrowed down some of the most common, and I put those in a formal kind of poll for people to actually put a vote. I restricted the voting to only one answer per person. So they had to pick the one that they felt was the most significant. And I didn't allow people to add new options. The number one was that meetings are too much business, not enough education, and tend to be boring. So that was the main thing. This that had 51% of the votes, and this is out of almost 300 votes. And then the second most popular one was negative lodge culture, and this is specific to whatever lodge they belong to. It said cliques, politics, egos, or unmasonic behavior. That was 20%. So there was a big difference between the first and second. We have a 31 percentage point difference. And then it tapers off after that. So I find this informative because if you have at least an active group of people giving a very definite response of what they're looking for, I'm sure, I didn't do a scholarly statistical review of these answers to try to see if there's if we could consider this I'm missing the word, but whenever you actually scrutinize it and you have a bell curve and you see what are outliers and what's but 300 votes is a significant number of them. So lodges, when they read this, I'm hoping that they can see, okay, well, we need to do something about making sure that our meetings are more engaging. So I thought that was it was a very active conversation. So I'm very happy that it got people so motivated to express themselves.
But I think it's also making people aware of their options. Now, prime example, I know in my case, one of the lodges I belong to, one of the fraternal orders, I moved, and there was, one part of it was the lodge in the town I was moving to wasn't very welcoming. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't know, because I was fairly new to fraternalism, was that you can actually remain with your old lodge as a member at large. You can still keep that tie, maybe eventually get back into it, but it's something that people aren't really, a lot of members of these organizations aren't really aware of, that there are options. You don't have, and that's the other thing I think you'll agree with me, something we do have to be aware of is to be able to have people to sit down and have that discussion with members of your lodge saying, listen, this is really this is what I need from this, or this, you know what I mean? Or maybe we do need to change things up a little bit or something like that. They're not really made aware of it, right? So not, instead of just maybe, how can I say this? Instead of, or even for that matter, the people that are leaving the lodge, perhaps maybe we should keep it more like, to put it in a workplace term, is let's have that exit interview.
Exactly.
What would we have done to have kept you? Why are, you know what I mean? Or
Absolutely. I have a presentation that I give in lodges called Applied Freemasonry, Timeless Tools for the Future. And in it, I explore what Freemasonry would have meant for someone back in the 1920s, what it possibly could mean what it means to us in the 2020s, and try to extrapolate and see, could what Freemasonry offer be useful in 2120? And part of that presentation is about how do we apply some of the lessons in Masonry about measuring things. If you think about the tools of Freemasonry, they're inspired by the building of majestic cathedrals and temples in antiquity. And that can't be done unless that there is a master plan, that there is a diligence in measuring things, in, like I say, measuring twice and cutting once. See, maybe when you and I are doing small works around the house, maybe cutting some wood for a project or something, well, if we didn't measure twice and only cut once, it's an inconvenience. Maybe it's an extra trip to Home Depot, or you'll have to make do. But when you're building a cathedral and you're talking about a hewn stone coming out of a quarry, your measurements have to be very precise so that you are not wasting the material, wasting the time, the energy into moving it, and then finding out that you've committed a sin of omission. So a part of what I talk about in that presentation is that one of the measurements that we can do in the application of Freemasonry is not limited to you measuring yourself as an individual, but the organization measuring the different, let's call them KPIs, the key performance indicators, measuring the measuring attrition, measuring the satisfaction that people are expressing, and a specific lodge of whatever order it is. It could be the Odd Fellows, it could be the Masons, it could be Knights of Columbus, whichever. Having what you suggested of having an exit interview. Maybe a few months, let's say a year or two after you haven't seen this person, you could have an automatic trigger, considering all the technology that we have, to tell us, hey, we haven't heard from this person in so time, and try to engage with them. Say, hey, why, how come you're not engaged anymore? That answer is super valuable.
Before we go any further, I want to draw your attention to the PayPal link in the details section of this segment. Please click on that, make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. I do not have a sponsor, so everything you see here on Points of Light Radio is not sponsor driven. So make that donation. We will use that to move the podcast forward. God bless you. Let's keep learning, shall we? And I think you'll agree with me too, because I've touched on this in a previous segment of Points of Light Radio. But a lot of times, people don't want to wait around when it comes to degrees, the qualifications for moving up to that next degree. Sometimes we kind of leave it too late, shall we say. I know we want to move them when they're ready, but sometimes people will sit there. Well, we want to get a group of so many to move up, but you can't leave someone just sitting there either, right?
Yeah, that's where systems like really come in handy. Think of this. Let's say I'm the senior deacon of my lodge, and part of my responsibility is petitions. It's for me to deal with whomever is calling in with interest, starting to visit our dinners to become more acquainted with the group. That's part of my responsibility. If I didn't receive any guidance from my previous senior deacon, then I'm going to be inventing systems. I'm going to be trying to figure out, right? I'm going to be trying to figure out, okay, how often do I call this person? Do I send them an email? Do I text them? Do I call them? Should I invite them to this event, to the other? I shouldn't be guessing, right? There has to be some sort of system that you make a phone call, show interest. Here's the invitation to come join us for dinner. We encourage you to join us for dinner a few more times before we even contemplate presenting you with a petition. We want to encourage you to come to the barbecue and get to know us a little bit. Let us see how you behave in a group setting. There's so many things, but if I make that up, I'm very nosy. So I don't like to sit and wait for people to give me steps to follow. I like to say, okay, what's the next step? And I try to put together a plan. But what happens if the guy that comes next to that position, I don't give him what I learned? Now he's also going to struggle.
I agree with you.
Exactly. Yep. Because we're not being surprised by how people show interest in the fraternity, how they progress through it. That's not a surprise. It's a standard thing that we know and we can follow. So being able to establish systems like that and have a leadership that is copacetic, so that as they progress, they're all carrying that system forward and maybe polishing it, making it more efficient, removing maybe some of the fat so that it's more efficient. And that's the ideal. But if you don't have a quorum from which to select the adequate members of the leadership, then you may have some people that are not really into leadership. They maybe just want a title, or they see that the lodge doesn't have someone to do that, so they volunteer because nobody else is doing it.
But we've talked about, one thing I did want to talk to you about, I did touch on this when we were kind of getting acquainted, and it ties in, of course, to brothers turning their backs on the lodge, is the one-day degree rallies with Freemasonry. Now, I understand this is spread, because even Royal Arch Freemasonry is now having what's called degree festivals. So this is spread, but I've also heard the statistic that, statistically speaking, the people that come in during your one-day degree rallies, or whatever you call them, one day where they're raised from entered apprentice to master mason, the keeper rate among them is the same as the brothers who come in the traditional way. So what's your
I've seen numbers.
On that?
I've seen numbers. I have a good brother, John Rourke, who is a member of the Masonic Roundtable podcast, and he took the task to actually try to gather data about this. And he was able to speak with a few Grand Lodges, speak with a few jurisdictions to see how it would show up in a graph. And just like you say, it didn't move the needle. It was impressive when it happened, right? So you can have a rally and we're going to initiate these many people and we're going to do all of this. And now our numbers have this artificial bump of membership. But think about the progression from entered apprentice to fellow craft to master mason. It should be a journey of apprenticeship, literally, of being a companion and then eventually becoming a master. That doesn't happen overnight. And there is an ambition for the person that becomes initiated. Now they have some labor to do in the quarries before they are technically qualified to become a fellow craft. Is there an incentive? Like, you're already a master mason. Now you can travel, you can join the shrine, you can join other organizations. So is there really an incentive for that person to stay in the lodge? You know,
the way I see it, sometimes you might not have a choice. If your lodge is ready to close due to lack of membership, you might not have a choice. On the other hand, you can cheapen it by bringing in 400 in a day, like I've heard that before. But also, if you don't follow those rallies up with further education, mentorship, which is something I've covered on a previous segment of Points of Light Radio, I think you'll agree, you can't just have those rallies and then not follow up with these new members. You need to follow that up. And I think that's one of the problems, that we're just bringing them in saying, okay, we got a bunch of new Master Masons sitting here. Let's get back to the way things were before. You can't do that. Yeah.
And think of this, like, what do you want them for? Do you want them to come to the meeting that we already told you was boring, right? You're going to stuff it full of people, all going to be, okay, this is not what I signed up for. And also I think of, what are we really doing? If we really think about what's the whole purpose of becoming a Freemason, and it's to take the rough form of the stone that you are and progressively work at it to bring it to a more perfect state. You can't accelerate that process. It's not sustainable for you to, or it's not realistic for you to expect that an individual joins a fraternity and now he is the best man you ever met. What made him the best man you ever met? It's only the hard work of him recognizing what his flaws are, having the support of the other brothers, helping him become a better husband, a better business person, a better employee, whatever it is that they're looking to improve upon. Unless they're diligent at chipping at that stone, they're not going to fit when they're brought over to the temple, so to speak. So if we look at Masonry in the way that, okay, this is something for which I'm going to invest time so that I can become the best version of myself, there's no rush. Let's work at it. Okay, what did I learn in this step? How can I apply that to my family, to my business? All right. And then once you feel comfortable that you are dexterous enough with those tools that you provided, now you can start casting your gaze further along. But until then, it's it's not a it's I don't think it's a sustainable effort to see that as as a as an adequate tool for increasing membership.
Now, what do you love most about being a Freemason?
It changes with time. When I first joined, for me, it was that access to knowledge that could help me become a better person. It was the pride of knowing that I went through some of the same things that some of my heroes in history had gone through. So, if you think of, like, I don't know, Simon Bolivar, you think of George Washington, you think of, many upstanding men in society and in history.
Or even more recent history, Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt. Would that war have been won?
Imagine.
You don't think their Masonic membership really helped cement that relationship?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a great possibility that, it had something to do. The closeness of them, when you look at the footage, you can see it's evident that these two men had a bond that was different than many dignitaries when you see them interact. But what excites me the most about Freemasonry, like I said, it fluctuates, so it changes. Right now, one of the highlights for me is having access to current men of excellence and being able to have conversations that are stimulating. And we can have difficult conversations regardless of any differences we may have in political opinion, any differences we may have in spiritual beliefs. We can still engage in conversations that are going to be stimulating and ideally.
And you have the technology today to facilitate that too. Where in the past.
Oh yeah. That's true.
Right?
Yeah. Look what happened during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I've had my podcast since 2012.
Yeah.
So I had some traction and I had some followers. And when the pandemic happened, I was active in Lodge and I had to take a step back and not be active in Lodge. And I realized early in the pandemic, there are going to be a lot of brothers that can't get that access to another person like they used to be, on every meeting. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to be separate. And I thought a lot about some of our older members. If they're not very familiar with social media or the new technology, they're going to be isolated, fully isolated. And one of the efforts that I made was to try to establish some sort of touchstone. Okay, let's come together on a weekly basis and have conversations, and we'll help you join the Zoom call. And we did that a few times for my lodge, and brothers, the response that we got from the brothers, they were super excited. I was surprised to see the makeup of the meeting. The majority of the brothers in the meetings that we did during the pandemic were older brothers.
What has it done for you, though? Like, not just Freemasonry, but shall we say, even some of the other activities you've done with Freemasonry. What has that done for you as a person? What do you feel it's done? Has it enriched your life to some degree?
It has. The introspection aspect of Masonry. Every tool that you're presented in Masonry, every lesson is designed to help you figure you out. For the most part. Some are designed to help you do something else, but for me, that is very useful. It's a useful, let's call it technology, right? Or philosophy. For me to be, let's say I'm in a car and I'm in a hurry and I start becoming impatient with the person that is in front of me. and recognizing, oh, thinking back at some of the lessons that I've received. Excuse me. I have in my rearview mirror, I have it's a pocket watch that I received as a gift that has a square and compasses. So in my line of sight, I have a square and compasses to remind me of keeping my passions within due bounds, circumscribing my desires, like all the different lessons that you can think from Masonry. They're there at a glance, which is the whole purpose of having a symbol, is that quick recall. You know the lessons behind this symbol, right? How do they apply in this situation? So I've saved myself from flicking a lot of people off, if you ask me.
Well, Mr. Sepulveda, I appreciate your time today. I got to have you back. This has been great. And all the best to you and to your podcast and to your lodge, sir.
Thank you very much, Stan. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Wasn't he beautiful? Tell ya, I love having podcasters here on Points of Light Radio, fellow podcasters. It's just great. I learn so much from them, and it's wonderful to kind of compare notes a little as well as you go along. And we'll definitely be having this gentleman back here. But I want to break this down a little bit. This was a wide-ranging conversation, right? And our new friend here spent an enormous amount of time and it sounds like he has spent an enormous amount of time and resources trying to formulate answers as to why members are resigning from our lodges. Right? And don't forget, guys, when I say that, our lodges, we're not just talking about Freemasonry. Most of what we, in fact, all of what we talked about today, has that crossover effect where there are other lodges such as Odd Fellowship, KOP, even the Orange Order and so on, are having this same issue of people either either quitting or quietly quitting. I mean, it is important to see that and good to see that someone is actually looking for causes and effects, shall we say, as well as solutions to the issue of resignations. And I do stand by what I said during this conversation, that we can't just allow members to go dormant or resign without an interview or at least a conversation, right, as to why they're leaving. Because in many cases, the reasons for resigning go way deeper than, let's just say, I don't have time or I'm moving away, all of which there's solutions to, right? Many of these excuses could hide like deeper resentment, such as a member, that's dealing with the cliquishness of a lodge, or just not feeling engaged in what's going on, not feeling like they have a voice, right? It could have to do with the fact that we're not properly educating, and you've heard this before here on Points of Light Radio, when many cases we're not spending enough time educating or mentoring our new brothers. Okay? That's very important, right? But if you are, and I want to say this, if you are sitting on that fence, trying to decide whether to leave, just remember this, okay? Matthew 18:15 says, "Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee," or offend thee, "go to him and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. And if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother." Okay, never forget that. These are your brothers. And if someone is approaching you like that, don't be afraid to have that conversation. Don't get all defensive, right? Have that conversation in brotherly love, right? And I'll close with that. I hope you've enjoyed this. I want to thank, first again, I want to thank my guest, Juan Sepulveda, for appearing on this podcast today. I also want to draw your attention to the PayPal link in the details section of this segment. You can hit on that and make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. We will use that to move the podcast forward. You can also going to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input, and this is one of those topics where, let's be honest, I want you to lay it out with me in the detail section of this particular segment. Why did you leave, or why do you feel people are leaving our lodges, right? You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My X handle is at PO Light Radio. My Bluesky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, until we meet again, just keep stepping right into that light.